Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. The long weekend is here. Will it be smooth sailing for travelers?
This is our busiest long weekend of the season, so we are at peak travel.
BC Ferries insists all is well. YVR says plan ahead, and highway patrols urge safety above all. Plus, major layoffs at a major telecom giant.
When you merge with another firm or take it over like that, you're always looking for ways to trim costs.
Telus blames a 60% dive in profits for axing 6,000 jobs. And combating drought.
All we can do is try to slow the rate at which we deplete the reservoirs. So any kind of restrictions is going to help with that.
The province triggers strict new restrictions today in a heightened bid to conserve water.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Anita is away tonight. I'm Tanya Fletcher. Well, it's 6 o'clock on the Friday of BC Day long weekend. You know what that means. A mass exodus on the highways, long lines at the airports, and jam-packed ferries. Yasmin Gandam is finding out what to expect for passengers by air, land, and sea on this BC Day long weekend.
So far, so good at the Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal. After weeks of infuriating delays, cancellations, and technical difficulties, nerves were running high as passengers started lining up for long weekend sailings.
We know that there have been some frustrating moments for our customers over the past long weekends with the Coastal Celebration being out of service. She is back now and running this long weekend, and I think you're seeing that reflected in the fact that there are very few, well, we haven't seen any sailing waits except for today, that one sailing wait to Nanaimo.
I'll be waiting for you in arrivals.
The company is confident it will be smooth sailing throughout the weekend, but passengers are urged to make a reservation to make sure they can get on board when they need to.
You can still check current conditions to see if there are some spaces available. They're very limited.
At YVR, it's also business as usual. The airport is experiencing lower air traffic than last year. Still, planning ahead wouldn't hurt.
We do ask that people just be ready, be prepared, bring some patience. It will be a bit busy, but at this point, we have no reason to anticipate anything out of the ordinary.
On the roads, it's one of the busiest travel weekends of the year. With more traffic comes more risk. BC Highway Patrol says they'll have more officers out this weekend.
Obey the speed limits, wear your seatbelts, and that's very important. Seatbelts save lives. Drive sober and drive distraction-free. That's another very important one. I can't stress that enough. Have a plan. If you're driving with a friend, have a designated texter.
He says drivers should expect volume delays on the Coquihalla Highway and other major routes. And on roadways with changeable speed limits, travelers should be prepared for slowdowns.
Please prepare for boarding.
The overall advice this long weekend, plan ahead, no matter by car, plane, or boat. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, telecom giant Telus says it is looking to shed 6,000 jobs. The company says it needs to free up cash flow to remain competitive. Profits are said to be down 61% from this time last year, although they still raked in almost $200 million. The cuts aren't sitting well with the union representing some Telus workers.
So I guess really what it is about making sure the few at the top of the Telus hierarchy continue to reap crazy salaries, and even more so, extreme bonuses on the backs of their workers.
It's not yet known where geographically or in which departments these job cuts will come from, but at least one telecom analyst believes tech support jobs could be on the chopping block.
They're looking at how new technologies and AI in particular can make the customer self-support system a better experience. But are customers really looking for that? No. I mean, if I'm phoning up, if I got a problem, I'd like to speak to somebody that can hear what I've got as an issue.
We know the cuts involve 4,000 jobs at its main business and 2,000 at Telus International. That's an arm with offices around the globe. In a statement, the CEO of Telus says the cuts are being made with, quote, a very heavy heart. He, according to a corporate filing, was paid $16 million last year. And it's still unclear whether any of those job losses will affect workers here in BC. But overall, Canada's unemployment rate did tick up slightly in July. As Nisha Patel reports, it is the third monthly increase now in a row.
Thousands of people lined up for hours at this Toronto job fair. Many hopeful they'll find work after being turned down by other employers.
They said, okay, we'll let you know later, or they're not looking for applicants right now.
I got one interview, but then it got canceled.
There's a lot of opportunity, but it seems like employers are getting a little bit pickier.
Not long ago, businesses were having a tough time finding workers to fill positions. Now it's a little easier.
We're looking to hire about 15 to 20 employees from everything from cooks, preppers, dishwashers, cashiers.
It's a signal the hot labor market is starting to cool. Canada unexpectedly lost about 6,000 jobs overall in July. The unemployment rate ticked up slightly to 5.5%. Still, workers are demanding higher compensation, as average hourly wages rose 5% compared to the same time last year. Some sectors are showing more weakness than others. There were fewer Canadians working in construction, public administration, and transportation, while more were hired in healthcare and education.
We are having more people join the labor market. And so where does that show up? Well, it shows up in our unemployment rate.
That surging immigration is one factor, more than 1 million people last year alone. This economist says the economy is also slowing down as higher interest rates take effect.
And I think we are seeing demand ease a bit. And as a result, companies are going to be dealing with that slowing in demand for their goods and services.
The latest job numbers come as Telus announced it's cutting 6,000 jobs globally, saying it needs to stay competitive in a slower economy. The telecom giant saw profits fall more than 60% in its latest quarter.
The cooler labor market may take some pressure off the Bank of Canada as it tries to rein in inflation. Still, economists are divided on whether this will be enough to avoid another interest rate hike next month. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, voting has just now come to a close for BC port workers. They're deciding whether to accept the latest deal that could end the province's longest-running port dispute. The two-day vote wrapped up just a few minutes ago, right at 6 p.m. We will bring you those results as soon as they're announced. Union leaders are recommending the contract be approved. 7,400 international longshore and warehouse union workers first went on strike July 1st, and then last week they rejected a previous deal that was reached at the negotiation table and then returned to the picket lines. Well, to downtown Vancouver now, and the city centre is the backdrop of another homicide. This one happened overnight. There was some kind of confrontation on Granville Street around Smythe. This was at about 3:30 this morning. A 32-year-old man was allegedly stabbed and later died in the hospital. No arrests have been made at this point, but police are asking anyone who might know anything about what happened to come forward. This hot, dry, and sunny stretch of weather is on the horizon for the foreseeable future. In Vancouver, Stage 2 water restrictions kicked in today. Lower than normal rainfall has led to drought conditions across much of the province. As Renee Filipponi reports, it is a crisis that could stretch on for months.
So Program B right now is running.
Students working for the City of Vancouver check on sprinkler systems, making sure lawns won't be watered, and that trees and shrubs only get water for short periods of time in the morning.
Outdoor water use is the biggest jump in water use in the dry season, and irrigation systems, often people set them and forget them.
The city is urging people to accept their brown lawns or risk a $500 fine.
We also have an enforcement program where we have 3 bylaw officers who are actively patrolling 7-day-a-week shifts.
23 of 34 water basins in BC are in a level 4 or 5 drought, and the situation is getting worse. The reservoirs that feed Metro Vancouver are in normal range right now, but water use has been up 20% this year because it's been so hot.
We're looking forward to make sure that we don't run into some kind of a hazard where we simply don't have enough water for the drinking, the cooking, and the cleaning.
Streams are dry, just like our forests.
This expert says it's possible more restrictions could be needed down the road if people don't conserve.
We really do need to slow the rate of depletion of the reservoirs. And the only way we can really do that is to do things individually, like perhaps shorter showers, don't flush the toilet as often.
This fair celebrates agriculture in BC, an industry suffering right now.
Climate change seems to be a very, very real thing.
This dairy farmer says irrigation is helping them have enough food for their herd right now, but she's worried about what's to come.
Feed shortage is going to become an issue, which of course drives our costs up, which in turn will drive the price of our milk products up.
And with no rain in the forecast, new restrictions will be in place for some time. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now let's take a closer look at how this is unfolding in Metro Vancouver. Stage 2 watering restrictions are in effect, yes, and are dependent on each municipality, which also sets its own fines. So under Stage 2, residents are not allowed to water their lawn or top up any water features. Spray parks will not run automatically, only if they are user activated. And sprinklers can be used still to water trees, shrubs, and flowers, but only during specific hours in the morning. Now these restrictions are expected to stay in place until mid-October. Evacuation orders are still in place for areas around the destructive Downton Lake fire. It continues to burn at the edge of Gun Lake. It's about a 2-hour drive northwest of Whistler. The flames now cover 21 square kilometers. Roughly half a dozen properties have been destroyed so far this week. This fire is still considered out of control. And meanwhile, north of Kamloops, another 100 properties have been put on alert today thanks to the Adams Lake wildfire. Overall, there are 354 active wildfires burning in BC, and 19 of them are considered of note. Well, Darius Madavi joins us now with a first look at the forecast. Darius, we know it's been dry heading into the long weekend. How is it shaping up weather-wise for these fires?
Well, we talked yesterday a bit about how much the drought rating impacts the fire danger rating. Having such a high drought rating really causes just a higher baseline for what the fire danger could be. And we saw that today. You can see compared to yesterday, in the central interior, our fire danger has come up. Now, just a couple days ago, they were seeing pretty consistent rainfall, but just a day or two of dry weather, and you can have that fire danger shoot back up really easily because we're having such serious drought conditions. Now, if we look at what we're seeing across the province, this high pressure system still dominating for now. Now, we talked a bit about other fires around the province, like around Kamloops and Whistler. Into next week, we could be seeing rain in those places thanks to both this low pressure system we've been tracking for the last few days in the Gulf of Alaska and this one in the United States that are going to be pushing some moisture up into the province. Now, that's not going to be seen tonight in Vancouver, at least. We're going to have a fairly cloud-free night tonight, a bit of cloud overnight, and then sunny morning tomorrow. And then I know it's the long weekend coming up, so really quickly we can talk about on Saturday, we're going to be having a fairly moderate temperature. Same story on Sunday, and then Monday is when we first have a possibility of seeing some rain.
All right, we'll certainly welcome what we can get on that front. Thanks so much, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, this year's Vancouver Pride Parade is working to be more inclusive than ever by moving out of the West End. And as Eva Yuguen-Sen shows us, it's intended to welcome more people to watch, take part, and also to march.
And he watched when we walked in 2019, and that was rough. That was a hard road.
Every year, thousands of people have marched through Vancouver's West End neighborhood to celebrate Pride. It's loud, crowded, and too steep for some people.
We have a lot of members who have never been to Pride because of the barriers that were there.
They can't access us because the sidewalks were too narrow, or there wasn't transit, or there was mobility issues.
This year, the parade route will be a bit longer than before, beginning in the West End, winding along Beach Avenue and then Pacific Street. But it will also be flatter and wider and easier for more people to navigate. It's also close to 3 SkyTrain stations.
We already heard from members who say that they're really excited for the first time ever to be able to participate in the parade and in the festival. So
McCain is this year's Grand Marshal and has long been advocating for Vancouver Pride to be more accessible.
It's really nice to be a Grand Marshal that has a disability, that has a visible disability, that people know are neurodivergent so that they can see that representation.
Vancouver's Pride Parade and Festival has for years been hosted in the West End, historically known as Vancouver's Gay Village. Advocates say expanding out of the neighborhood will include more people.
that area is traditionally very cisgendered, very white, very gay, male, where I'm a part of the queer community, which is completely different from the gay community.
Our hope over the next number of years is that Vancouver Pride, A, represents everybody, and B, is not just located downtown.
The Vancouver Pride Festival is happening this weekend. The parade will take place Sunday. Eva Yuguen-Senge, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, Pride events are already getting underway in Vancouver, including one this evening for the trans community. Yasmin Renea was there earlier and just a few moments ago spoke with media liaison Lindsay Lynn. Take a listen.
We're here at the Trans Pride March. It's just about to get underway. It's an event that celebrates the trans community, but it's also to raise awareness about the issues that the community faces, like bullying, violence, and discrimination. And for more on this, we're here with Lindsay Lind, who is with the event. Hi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
So tell me about what's going on today.
Well, we're going to do a march. It's not really a parade, so we're not going to have any floats. We're going to have a march, and it's going to be sort of similar to what would be happening if we were having a demonstration or, to take back our power. But we're giving it a bit more of a celebration, liberation sort of happiness. So that's where we're at with this today.
Mm-hmm. And we got the crowd behind us. So yeah. How many people do you expect will show up today?
Well, the numbers in the past have been in around the 1,000 to 2,000 mark. Wow. We're not sure what we're going to get today because it's been, 3 years since 2019 since we've had this. Yeah.
Yeah, and what does it mean to you in the community that this is the first Trans Pride March since the pandemic?
It's needed. It really is needed just because of the things that are going on in the world, down south in the States and, in European nations and stuff like that. We're seeing people that are scared, really scared. Yeah, and it's good to be together again.
Why is it important to hold these events, especially during Pride Month here in Vancouver?
I think it is a grassroots event that is a lot different from saying the official sponsored events that are, have corporate money going into them, which is not a bad thing in and of itself, but it's nice to see corporations spending money where money is supposed to be spent. But this is really just us. It's just us. And it's small businesses that are just us as well. And they're all in the community and they're offering gifts of support. And we're going to have raffles and give away lots of prizes and all sorts of things. It's going to be fun.
Fun. So tell me about the route that people are going to take during this march.
Yeah, well, it looks like, this is Commercial Drive just behind us. It looks like they're going to rally some troops, it sounds like. And so we're going to go down Commercial Drive and then in towards Victoria Park. So it's about a kilometer route. Yeah, not too long.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today, Lindsay.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Well, after 2 weeks and more than 100,000 votes, British Columbians have made their choice. I feel like we need a drum roll here. Sprout is officially the best lake in the province. It's on Vancouver Island next to Port Alberni, in case you weren't sure, and it has won the search for BC's best lake, defeating 47 others in the province to be crowned the champion. And joining us live, yes, you guessed it, no one else other than the reporter who put this all together, Justin McElroy. I am seeing you right now for the very first time in your summer best. So tough assignment for you today. Tell us exactly how Sprout became the GOAT of all lakes.
You know what? We got over 600 submissions across this province, 48 shortlisted, but it was Sprout in the end, as you said, on Vancouver Island, being the champion, and boy, was it close. In the final, it defeated Shuswap Lake by just 51 to 49%. Less than 150 votes separated them, but Sprout certainly a deserving champion. Of course, on Vancouver Island, the traditional home of the Seychat people and the Hapukshet, it is a large lake, though not as large as every lake in this province. It's a beautiful lake, but some might argue there are more beautiful. But you look around me here, Tanya, you can see plenty of boats. You can see plenty of people enjoying all of the beaches. At the end of the day, this was a lake that was a deserving champion, and it was one that was won not just because of the lake, but the people around it. What makes a body of water the best lake in British Columbia?
It's just so beautiful around there. There's so many different areas to explore. And
it's so pretty.
The water, it's fresh and clean. You can swim in it, you can drink it.
It is undoubtedly BC's best lake. I've been to all the different lakes.
But only one lake can be best in British Columbia, and its name is Drought. So, why this lake? Well, you can mention the beaches or the boats, the coves or the cottages. There's just a lot for everyone to do. But this is democracy. The title of best lake goes to those who show up and vote. And the people in the Alberni Valley did just that.
Say the vast majority of people who live out here have lived out here their whole lives. We're not millionaires, but just working people who had the opportunity to enjoy it. And a lot of cabins as well, where people just passed down generation to generation.
And while you may have never been to Sprout, chances are you've heard about it.
Huge orange flying boat rises off the lake. 1,000-year-old petroglyphs doing a double take, pointing the finger at eternity.
The famed Martin Mars water bombers in Coburn's iconic song, but also these petroglyphs, evidence of the thriving life here for centuries.
To the Nuu-chah-nulth people, the lake is known as Kleekoot, and it has been in the lands of the Hupetchisitt and the Tshot First Nations since time immemorial. Kleekoot was important as a space for the cleansing of individuals, as well as being a vital place for meeting, as well as being a source of water for animals and the people here.
And it will keep so for a community that's proud of their lake, but also a little protective.
The community really has rallied around this competition, and at the same time, we've seen a lot of people say, no, don't tell everyone about Sprout Lake. We don't want everyone knowing about it, but the reality is there's so much privacy on this lake still. There's so many arms that you can go to, or so many areas you can go to where you just won't see other people, and don't think that'll ever change.
And if being called the best lake in BC does change Sprout a little, well, I've already faced my punishment. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Sprout Lake.
I need to have the whole full debrief on how that happened there. But Justin, I was fortunate enough to get to land in a seaplane on Sprout Lake, a float plane on assignment to Port Alberni a few years ago, and I was stunned at how beautiful it really was. It's such a gem. Obviously a beautiful lake, a much loved spot on the island. So how have you been enjoying it the last few days?
You know what, we've been talking to people on the lake, their joy of being the best, some of them saying it'll help the lake with the highway closures this summer. But we also got on the lake as well. A couple people took us on boats. When in Rome, you got to go on the tube. And, they may have taken a couple liberties with me here and there. Might have gotten a little bit wet at the end of it. But you know what? You have to laugh. You have to enjoy it. You have to do what the locals do. And you have to do it in the best lake in British Columbia, Sprout Lake, here in the middle of Vancouver Island.
Justin, this has been a much needed and welcomed series you've done. Thank you so much for taking us through this. Enjoy the rest of your time there and your flight home too.
Thanks, Tanya.
All right, in celebration of this lake and the region as a whole, let's take a deeper look at the people who've called the area home for generations. As we just heard in Justin's reporting, they have a different name for this body of water. And our Wamish Hamilton now tells us more about the place known as Kleekoot.
Before it was Sprout Lake, it was and it still is known to Indigenous people as Kleekoot, or long flat area. Port Alberni is home to two First Nations, the Hupetchisitt and the Tshot First Nations. I'm a member of the Hupetchisitt First Nation, and I have family in the Tshot First Nation. Brandy Lauder is the Hupetchisitt Chief Counselor.
There's great beaches, parks, easy access. You can rent houseboats, there's campsites. It is the most popular. So we're not surprised. We lived here for thousands of years and enjoyed it ever since.
Kleekoot was also the name of a First Nation. The people still live here, and they are one of three separate nations that make up the Hupetchisitt. For the Kleekoot, the lake was part of its traditional landholdings.
At one time, we had a war with a neighboring nation on the east coast of the island, and in many, many years of war with them, They sent warriors down and killed off a lot of our women and children. Our numbers as the 3 nations that were here originally started to die down because of this war, and we banded together.
Sproat Lake was always part of Kleekoot territory, and it was part of some big events, the most significant of which was a natural one. An ancient petroglyph is etched into this rock face. It tells the story of a great tsunami that hit the area. What the tsunami is said to have washed up became a legend that has been handed down through oral history.
It does refer to a tsunami that happened in the 1700s. It was very large, and a killer whale got trapped in Sproat Lake. When the whale was finally killed, the Kleekoot people dragged it on shore, cut open the belly, and saw all these different creatures. They got so used to living in fresh water, to see this killer whale get trapped there was a sight.
Visitors will no doubt flock to see BC's newest best lake. They'll take in the beauty, the boating, and other features. But Kleekoot and its petroglyph will remain a place of history and mystery to local First Nations. Wamish Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
A group in Chilliwack is employing vulnerable people facing homelessness and addiction. Organizers say it gives workers a sense of purpose and pride. Benit Brage spent the morning with them.
This program in Chilliwack employs people facing homelessness and addiction, and they're on a mission to clean up the city streets.
The streets are getting cleaner and cleaner, and it's good for society to see that. Like this particular parking lot here is the nightclub, and a year ago there was garbage everywhere through here, and now look at it.
They start early in the morning and are paid $50 each time for about 2.5 to 3 hours, and the program runs 4 days a week.
Just doing the society a good deed. It's not about the money. I would do it without the money.
Do my part, I guess, for the community. We find syringes laying around, right? Pick those up. Right. But little kids don't know. They poke themselves with some fentanyl in it and it'll kill them.
It's nice to have something in your wallet where you don't have to go around searching and ask somebody else and beg or whatever. I'll be 70 in a couple months and starting to get in the shape that I figure that I want to be in if I work out and do this garbage pickup.
Recently, the program got $125,000 from the province to expand it.
We want to set them up for success, and this is what it's like having a job. A lot of them take huge pride.
Organizers say they hope to grow the program, and these efforts are another step in finding jobs, permanent housing, and connecting with the community.
Well, this weekend, the long weekend, kicks off Abbotsford's 114th Agrifair. It is a celebration of the region's agricultural roots and showcases how it blossomed into a farming city. It'll be a full weekend lineup of concerts and activities, along with an antique farm machinery display and open horse shows. But it won't just be about farm life either. All-star wrestlers will even be coming down. Organizers say the event will be a chance to highlight the growth of farming in the community. The fair continues until Sunday evening. Well, still ahead, 3 Metro Vancouver newspapers announced their final print run as they go online only. We discuss the impact coming up next. And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Neighbors in a northern Alberta community are debating a proposed wind power project. 27 wind turbines are being proposed in the municipal district of Smoky River. The CBC's Luke Ettinger spoke with the people on both sides of this controversial project.
Not this quarter, but the next quarter of land over there, and then kind of in a row all along the bottom of the draw there. My name's Scott Ritchie. We found this beautiful little 20 acres here, halfway between McLennan and Nampa, and bought it last spring. In February of this year, we had just received an information package in the mail from ABO Wind advising of this planned project in the area. That was the first that we had heard about it. We'd actually lived around oil and gas all of our lives, in a lot of in Saskatchewan and northern Alberta here, and we didn't have any issues with it there, so it wasn't really a concern for us in that regard. with this, it was new, so it was something we were really looking into and investigating with the wind turbines, and just the proximity to our home, and you know, they were going to be within a kilometer, some of them, and just we were literally surrounded by them. It wasn't just one out in the field; they were going to be all around us.
So we will see the turbines in what is right now our view of fields, and I am perfectly fine with that. I think they look cool. I'm Susan Thompson, and I live on an acreage between Nampa and Falher. Even though I'm not a farmer, I love the lifestyle. I love seeing harvest every year. I love, you know, that small community where you know your neighbors and you help each other out. Hell, it's usually pretty windy. I can see why they're doing it here. I found out because people were against it, to be honest. So, and to me, this is an excellent project for the region because we need development. I find it extremely hypocritical. We have had endless oil development in this area. I didn't hear a peep when new tank farms were put in, tanks upon tanks upon tanks, when new pump jacks were put in, when new wells were put in.
Robert Brochu with the Reeve with the MD of Smoky River. It's new, and there needs to be a lot of regulations put in place. I would like to see the government sooner than later make those kind of decisions. It's unfortunate the way the process is in Alberta right now, and I really wholeheartedly hope it changes in the next little while to a better process so that things that divide the community don't happen. It's unnecessary in my opinion. And as it is, we may have a little bit of say in setbacks and in obviously in road use agreements and things like that, but I really wish the process was different.
We had proposed to the municipal district, the Smoky River, was to amend the land use bylaw around large wind turbines to increase the setbacks from residences for the turbines. So at the moment, it's worded in the bylaw to be at least 800 meters from a residence. We asked for that to be amended to at least 2,000 meters.
I'd love to see the same for oil sites. If they get that through, let's do the same for oil sites. I just sincerely hope that all of this doesn't scare the company away. That's all.
Welcome back. Well, how often do you pick up a physical newspaper to read? If you live in the Tri-Cities, Burnaby or New Westminster, come next week, you won't be able to get your hands on those regions' particular familiar community papers. 3 publications, the Burnaby Now, New West Record, and Tri-City News, are all moving to digital only. The chain of newspapers is owned by Glacier Media. The company announced that change today. The papers serve a combined population of nearly 700,000 people. And joining us live tonight to talk more about this is Alfred Hermida. He's a digital media specialist and journalism professor at the University of British Columbia. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Tanya.
So first of all, you've been part of online news basically since the first newsrooms went digital more than 25 years ago. Before we discuss what's happening today, at the core of it, do you see any meaningful difference in the way people get their news, be it print versus online?
I think the big difference we've seen is moving away from looking for the newspaper, seeking it out, picking it up, or tuning into a radio broadcast, and more really receiving the news throughout the day. We all carry these smartphones that serve not just to communicate, but also to get updates, to get notifications. And we get news from friends, we get it on social media, we get it from news headlines. Basically, news is simply with us all the time, 24/7. And that's really been the big change.
Now, small newspapers and community journalism serve, yes, a very niche or hyper-local audience. These newspapers are not shutting down entirely, but with the disappearance of that tangible newspaper in the move to online only, how do you think this might change people's habits in the way they consume local news?
Well, what's happened to print is in the last few years, really, its circulation has declined. Across Canada, it's only 14% of Canadians who actually pick up a print newspaper. So I think we're getting used to getting our news online, through social, through television still. And I think just to expect people just to keep on using print, their habits are changing. They're getting their news not first thing in the morning or the evening, but throughout the day. And often they're using their smartphone for that. So in some ways, this is adjusting to that new reality.
You talk about new realities, and I know earlier you talked about social media, but let's look at the forest through the trees here. When we take a step back and look at the fact that large tech companies like Meta this week announced they're limiting Canadians' access to news information on their platforms, what is the greater responsibility on the public then to stay informed, and what does that look like practically speaking?
And this is probably the greatest threat to local publications such as the ones we've seen here, Burnaby Now and the others, because Facebook really serves as a community of your friends, of your neighbors, of your interests. And a lot of local news sites have relied on Facebook from friends, people in the community posting news stories and driving traffic there. So we're going to move away from a situation where we expect the news to find us, where we're going to have to go seeking out that local news.
That is an excellent point, and we will see how that all unfolds in the future. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Tanya.
And that's UBC journalism professor and digital news specialist Alfred Hermida. Again, thanks for joining us. Well, coming up, Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny's fate is sealed. The Kremlin thought to be silencing him. After the break, just how much longer he'll be in jail. Stay with us.
It was the tobacco industry that was in the NDP government of the day's crosshairs in the late 1990s.
The government takes in taxes, there's no question about that, as we take in taxes on any other product. But we also spend almost $500 million a year in health costs, which we certainly don't spend on other products that are sold in British Columbia.
The province took 13 cigarette companies to court.
This is about recovering healthcare costs and damages to British Columbians.
The lawsuit was thrown out after the companies challenged it on constitutional grounds. The province amended its legislation and resumed the battle for billions of dollars in compensation. Ujjal Dosanjh was BC's premier.
There was absolutely clear evidence of their misrepresentation, their misleading or their lies about the consequences of the use of their products.
Now retired, Dosanjh says BC's case was modeled on similar lawsuits launched and won in the United States. But tobacco companies here put every possible obstacle in the way.
They argued, well, it was a legal product. Well, just because we give you the right to legally sell a product doesn't mean that you have the right to lie about it. That was our case.
The tobacco lawsuit still hasn't gone to trial, and now there's another similar case.
We do understand that these types of claims are defended often aggressively by the firms that are targeted, but that is no reason for us not to pursue cases where we believe that people have taken actions or failed to take actions in a way that harmed British Columbians. Simply because it may take a while for us to see some results from this doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it.
After 20 years in the works, Dosanjh doesn't think the tobacco case is dead. In fact, he believes BC will see money.
If the tobacco companies thought there was no action to be had, they would have argued that the province has no cause of action and it would have been dismissed out of hand. It hasn't been.
So it's already been 20 years. When will this happen?
Oh, that justice grinds slowly, right?
BC was the first province to sue the tobacco companies, but all of the other provinces followed its lead. Collectively, they're seeking $120 billion. New Brunswick is scheduled to go to trial soon, but BC's case is still in the discovery phase, and that's scheduled to continue well into next year. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Welcome back. Cleanup is underway south of Ottawa after Environment Canada confirmed at least one tornado touched down on the area last night. This was the scene around 7 o'clock yesterday evening, local time, near Metcalfe. That's a small community about 30 kilometers south of Ottawa. A heavy thunderstorm was sweeping through the region at the time. It was pounding the area with ping-pong-sized hail. It toppled fences and downed trees and power lines. Electricity has since been restored for most. Let's take you stateside, and a controversial reenactment has been staged at a school in Florida. Live ammunition was used to recreate the 2018 mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. The CBC's Sally Patterson reports that it was part of a lawsuit filed against a police officer who stayed outside during the massacre.
It was one of America's deadliest school shootings after a former student opened fire on Valentine's Day in 2018. 15 pupils killed during a 6-minute attack. 3 others died and 17 more were injured. Now a civil case is underway, brought by victims' families and survivors. Prosecutors claim school resource officer Scott Peterson ignored his training and that he intentionally avoided confronting the shooter. Peterson says he was unable to determine the source of the gunshots, but the prosecution wants to try and prove the former sheriff's deputy had heard upwards of 70 shots and that he knew where they were coming from. Last month, Peterson was found not guilty of all charges in a separate criminal case. As the acquittals were announced, the former law enforcement officer put his head down on the defense table and he cried. But this civil case is ongoing and the burden of proof is much lower. The families and wounded are seeking unspecified damages. Now, before Friday's reenactment, 9 members of Congress spent about an hour touring the building where the shooting took place. It's actually barely been touched since the incident, and bullet holes and blood stains are still visible in the halls. Following the shooting, a new state law raised the minimum age to buy a gun in Florida from 18 to 21. It also allocated millions of dollars for mental health assistance for children. But according to independent news organisation Education Week, there have been 23 school shootings this year that resulted in injuries or death. And there have been 167 such shootings since 2018. Families of victims say more stringent measures are needed to keep students at US schools safe. Sally Patterson for CBC News.
Overseas, Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been sentenced to another 19 years in prison. As the CBC's Peter Armstrong reports, Navalny and his supporters say this latest punishment is simply the Kremlin trying to silence one of its most prominent critics.
The verdict was announced in a small, drab room in a prison colony 240 kilometers east of Moscow. It was widely expected. In fact, Alexei Navalny himself posted messages on social media sites beforehand indicating he was expecting a long sentence. He said he expected what he called a Stalinist sentence. And sure enough, the court has decided he should serve another 19 years in prison. This is his 5th prison sentence and his longest by far. These charges are related to the activities of Navalny's anti-corruption foundation. That foundation has spent years trying to expose official corruption. It's organized large anti-Kremlin protests, and some of its highest profile work was done after Navalny was poisoned by nerve agent in 2020. Navalny nearly died in that attack, and as he recovered in Germany, he and his team worked to expose who was behind the poisoning, and they tracked the team that carried out the attack all the way back to the Kremlin. After all of that, he decided to return to Russia, knowing he faced the very real possibility of being locked up. Indeed, the moment he stepped off the plane, he was arrested. Navalny faces yet more charges, these ones potentially even more serious. Prosecutors have accused him of activities related to terrorism. But through all that, he's become the best-known opposition politician in the country. He is perhaps the biggest threat to Putin's government. That is, he would be if he wasn't serving a decades-long sentence in a penal colony. In that social media post, Navalny said, quote, "Its main purpose is to intimidate You, not me. He closed that message by saying, when the sentence is announced, please think about one really important thought. What else can I personally do to resist? Now he heads back to his cell to wait and see how his supporters and indeed the international community will react. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, London.
Still to come, the challenges for churches housing refugees in Ontario as they keep up with rising demand. The calls for more support after the break.
Yesterday, it would have been illegal to crack open a beer here in Dufferin Grove Park, but today, well, cheers.
Today, finally, August the 2nd, Torontonians are able to drink responsibly in 27 of our city's parks.
Whether or not to allow drinking in city parks has been a debate at City Hall for years. But earlier this year, a new approach was proposed, a pilot program to test out the idea.
The criteria included things such as park size, had to have access to washrooms, access to water drinking fountains, access to transit, and so many more criteria that would guarantee enjoyment would continue.
While the pilot is brand new, many of the park goers we spoke with say legalization won't make much of a difference given that people have been illegally drinking in parks for years.
People are clearly drinking. They're not particularly rowdy, they're not abusive, they just seem to be having a good time.
But others are concerned that city-sanctioned drinking will lead to bad behavior.
To encourage people to come to, our park, for all of us who live around here, it's terrible. I mean, it's going to mean that people then again feel this sort of freedom to misbehave.
What do you do in a drinking zone? You continue to drink. So you probably take more than you should to these locations, and you consume more than you should. And that is the risk.
City staff say bylaw enforcement officers will be out in parks to enforce the rules, but they'll be taking an education-first approach.
We will not be asking for ID. We will not be carrying breathalyzers. What we are looking for is people to act responsibly.
So the city's placed these signs in all of the pilot parks outlining all of the rules and regulations of the program. Those rules include not being able to drink within 2 meters of park amenities such as playgrounds, wading pools, and dog parks.
Park users are still expected to follow all existing laws and bylaws, including the rules against littering.
Over the course of the pilot, data will be collected that the city says will help council decide whether or not to keep the program going in the future. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Welcome back. New data has found that ocean temperatures have hit an all-time high, and scientists are sounding the alarm about the frightening implications for the planet. This week, the average daily sea surface temperature beat a record set in 2016. This is according to an EU climate change service. Oceans are a critical climate regulator because they soak up heat. They also produce half of the Earth's oxygen and influence the weather. And speaking of weather, Darius Madalvi joins us now with the latest. And Darius, this is right up your alley. What more can you tell us about what's going on here?
Well, it's really devastating, and it continues a trend that we've been seeing for quite a while. The oceans actually soak up around 90% of the heat that we release into the atmosphere, so it's a massive problem. And if you take a look, this is the oceans as they stand today. And anywhere you see orange, it's warmer than it usually is this time of year. Blue means cooler. So you can see we're in a massive heat wave pretty much around the world, especially in parts of the Atlantic, especially are seeing massive heat waves. And this has a massive implication for weather as well. As you referred to, this is the typhoon that we've been seeing, now downgraded to a severe tropical storm off the coast of China and Japan. And you can see that it's moving. These sort of typhoons become more and more intense as a result of those warming oceans, because the warm water provides it the energy it needs to continue. If we take a look, this is just a quick update before the long weekend on where we're expecting this severe tropical storm to go. It will briefly become a typhoon once again as it reaches some warm water off the coast of Japan before passing over the landmass. It should be not too devastating. The winds will be pretty high, around 120 kilometers per hour when it makes landfall, but the officials are aware and they are preparing for the situation. So we'll follow up on that after the long weekend. Now, if we take a look here at home, you can see this high pressure system we talked about. I'd mentioned how this low pressure system and this one off the coast will be bringing some showers later this week. So if we take a look at our precipitation forecast, you can see first it comes to the Kootenays by tomorrow afternoon. It spreads through the southern interior and up the coast on Sunday. And then by Monday, we get our first chance to get some rain here in Vancouver. The models have been flip-flopping a lot here, so I can't be sure whether we'll actually get the rain on Monday. But by Tuesday and Wednesday, we should get some amount of precipitation here in Vancouver all along the south coast, so for the island as well. Now, if we take a look for tomorrow, that rain doesn't get here yet. We have that chance of showers in the Kootenays. We have still a bit of rain lingering from a low in the Northwest Territories, in the northeast, but pretty sunny and just a little bit of cloud for most of the province. It's not until we look into later in the week that we see that rain reach us here in Vancouver. So get your beach activities in over the weekend.
I was going to say that times out nicely for the long weekend for any beach plans. Not often we see that many rain showers in a row in early August, but hey, we need it, I guess, this time of year.
Yeah. Chance of rain at least.
Chance of rain. We always hedge it that way. Very nice. Thank you so much, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, back to Ottawa, and pressure is mounting on the federal government to help house asylum seekers in Toronto. Many are still living in churches, which are bursting at the seams. Travis Danraj has that story.
Packing up, on the move again. Kevin Ephraim came to Canada in July from Nigeria. For him and hundreds of other refugees, this has been life ever since.
Most of us came with one bag.
Rain, blistering heat, cardboard to sleep on were reality at first. Then a local church stepped in. Nearly a month later, a city shelter bed has finally opened up.
Government has higher capacity than them, but in as much as it's a church, they are trying their best. They are trying, but government needs to assist them so that they will do better.
Our courtyard is full of people right now that want to come in.
All right, so this area is. Pastor Judith James says Toronto churches are scrambling to keep up with the demand for help. She wants city-run respite sites to be opened, something that has happened during extreme weather.
If churches can step up, mobilize ourselves to cater to, at one time, 230 people without notice, I am certain that the federal government, the city, and the province can do a lot more than what's been done.
Inside, rows upon rows of beds. Boys and girls clubs canceled, weddings postponed. In the kitchen, volunteers say they feel asylum seekers are not being treated fairly and point to race.
And when the crisis and war is going on in Ukraine, everybody went to the airport with flags. They went there open-handedly. They passed bills within a week in order to help the Ukrainians. Now, my folks have stood in front of the shelters for months, outside on the curbs. Where did they use the bathroom? Where did they get food to eat? Where did they get any form of assistance?
CBC News reached out to all three levels of government. Ottawa says it's already injected over $200 million to help, nearly half of that directly for Toronto. The city and province claim that is not enough. For advocates, it all amounts to political finger-pointing, while newcomers to Canada suffer. Travis Danraj, CBC News, Toronto.
Up next, the music coordinator of Vancouver's Fox Cabaret is showing off the venue to Taylor Swift. Could she be convinced to play there in his wildest dreams? Perhaps. Yes, that's straight ahead. Stay with us.
My question is, why isn't NACA here tonight dealing with this, giving us some answers to community people? Where are they? That's my question, and I find that hard to believe. Mr. Shane Thompson, whoever the guy is, I know who he is, but I mean, when they become ministers, they don't give a damn about what the little communities do. And that government that we have from 2019 to now is the worst government that's ever been in place in the history of Northwest.
So to address MACA and Shane, Sharon, I spoke to Shane extensively after this. We received a letter, and he told me that he could not come into the community until at least the end of August. I told him it was essential that we had someone from MACA, and that's what he said to me.
I know that we're asking for the MACA minister to come into the community, but I think that we should invite more members from the Legislative Assembly, such as the Minister of Housing, the Minister of Education. Maybe he doesn't want to come into the community alone, but we have more than just municipal concerns. So it would be nice to have more ministers come to the community.
After all your recyclables are collected from the curb, it ends up here at Essex Windsor Solid Waste Authority. The materials are then sorted based on category, and then they get sold to buyers. Anne-Marie Albadoni is the Manager of Environmental Services with the City of Windsor. She says people in Windsor are very avid recyclers, but sometimes...
My sense is that most of the time that's because people have run out of room in their recycle boxes. And so the easy thing to do then is to just throw it in their garbage.
According to Essex Windsor Solid Waste Authority, between 2021 and 2022, the diversions are currently sitting in a good spot, and it will be better once Windsor joins the Regional Organic Waste Project in 2025.
Research tells us that we should see anywhere potentially up to a 10% increase in our diversion rate as a result of taking food waste out of the garbage.
Ontario has a set interim goal to have diversion rates at 50% by 2030, and by 2050 they want to hit 80%. A senior advisor for the Association of Municipalities of Ontario says the province's current rate shows there's a lot more work that needs to be done to reach that goal. Dave Gordon suggests creating a policy to have recycling mandated in the industrial and commercial sectors, and creating organic collection programs for those sectors. As for residents, officials say Windsorites can also help by participating in the Blue Box program and make sure their containers are empty and clean.
Oh, let's talk entertainment now. And the music coordinator of the Fox Cabaret is one of many Vancouver Swifties who can't seem to shake off the pop star's decision to so far skip out on Vancouver in her global tour. So we do know she's coming to Toronto, but beyond that, we don't know. He is offering up the Cabaret, though, as perhaps some incentive as a venue he'd love her to consider. You can see for yourself. Take a look.
So the Fox Cabaret, what makes this such a good spot for a major pop star?
I mean, you can see the color red, which predominantly features in one of her albums.
Right.
So I think that's huge for her.
Okay, so where are we right now?
This is the Ample Green Room.
Wow, it's...
Lots of seating area.
Yeah, I see that.
We have a fridge that looks like an amplifier.
That's
for
pretty
people
cool.
that love rock and roll.
Yeah.
Coffee machine, sugar, garbage can. There's a heater if it gets too cold, depending on what time of year she wants to show up.
Fair enough, yeah.
That's great. Mirrors so she can do her makeup.
Yep.
You got it all. Tea. We have a kettle for tea.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is.
I think Taylor's gonna love it.
But I can tell you this: Taylor's gonna do 6 shows in Toronto. I can guarantee at least 10 shows here at the Fox Cabaret. I'll clear the calendar for her. This is the stage.
Okay.
Obviously fit for a pop star.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have monitors. And she doesn't even have to worry about bringing microphones because we have some.
You've got microphones.
We got tons.
You're ahead of the game.
She's good. You're good, Taylor.
At least 2 lights. Oh, more than 2.
We have, actually, I'm pretty proud of our lighting system. It's really, really great. If she wants hazer, we got hazer. We got fog, smoke machines, whatever you think. She wants blue, she wants reds, she wants purples, no problem.
She's not too far removed from the audience. The audience connection is really important for her.
Yeah. So she'll be able to collect the friendship bracelets to get thrown up on stage.
Yep.
And she'll be able to throw them back easily without hurting herself or exerting too much. Because I know she's dancing a lot, so you don't want to like hurt your back bending over to pick up a bracelet or anything. You can just like toss it back to a fan who will be greatly thrilled. It's a great spot, and I think Taylor would be really happy here.
And that wonderful story courtesy of our Liam Britton. That is your CBC Vancouver News for 6. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. And be sure to watch for CBC News and Sunday's Vancouver Pride Parade. Have a great BC Day long weekend. Good night.